Chosen one. They never hated you for being wrong, they hated you for being real. You didn't follow the script they expected. You didn't wear the masks they wore. You didn't pretend to fit in when everything in your soul knew you were set apart. That's what shook them. Your honesty, your light, your refusal to fake your way through life. You didn't want to play pretend like the rest, and they couldn't handle that. You were a living contradiction to their performance. Every time you showed up as yourself, you exposed the roles they were acting out. That's why they whispered. That's why they stared. That's why they distanced themselves. Because you being you made them feel seen, and not in the way they wanted. They couldn't control you, so they labeled you difficult. They couldn't understand your quiet, so they called you cold. They couldn't manipulate your emotions, so they called you heartless. But behind every insult was a silent confession: you were different. Too strong for their small games. Too deep for their shallow connections. Too real for their false reality. And they didn't know what to do with someone they couldn't define, so they rejected you. And yes, it hurt. The isolation. The betrayal. The way people walked away without explanation. But what you didn't realize is that their exit was never your loss, it was your liberation. God allowed them to fall off because their presence was contaminating your calling. You see, the real you, raw, chosen, unfiltered, was too much for their comfort zone. But not too much for God's purpose. The world tried to convince you that your authenticity was a liability, but heaven sees it as your greatest asset. Because God never anoints the fake. He anoints the faithful. He blesses the bold. And while they tried to convince you that being too emotional, too intense, too passionate was wrong, God was shaping you for a purpose too big for surface-level acceptance. They judged you because they didn't understand you, and they didn't understand you because you came from a place they've never been. You were sent to shift things, to break cycles, to walk roads that hadn't been walked before. So of course they didn't get you. You weren't meant to blend in. You were born to stand out. But because you ruined their illusion by simply being honest, they tried to ruin your reputation. They tried to box you in with rumors, twist your truth, and silence your voice. They thought if they could get enough people to doubt you, they could get you to doubt yourself. But they didn't know that what God put inside you wasn't man-made, it was heaven-born. They didn't know that your silence was strength, not surrender. They didn't know that while they were mocking your fall, God was planning your rise. And now it's your season to return. But you're not returning to seek revenge. You're not returning to explain yourself. You're not returning to fix what was never your fault. You're returning stronger. Softer, but stronger. Quieter, but more focused. Wiser, more grounded, more aware of who you are and whose you are. Because when they left, they didn't just leave your life, they left room for God to step in. And He did. In your silence. In your pain. In your nights of not understanding why you were always the one who felt things deeper, loved harder, and yet still ended up alone. God was there, teaching you, healing you, whispering identity back into your broken heart. You thought the wilderness was punishment, but it was preparation. You thought isolation meant abandonment, but it was really divine protection. You weren't rejected, you were hidden. Hidden from the eyes that couldn't see your worth. Hidden from the hands that would mishandle your destiny. Hidden until the right moment. And now that moment is near. Not because you've changed who you are, but because you've grown into it. The version of you that once begged for love is now rooted in self-worth. The version of you that once feared judgment now stands firm in truth. You no longer need their approval. You don't crave their attention. You've outgrown their games, their gossip, their ghosting. What used to break you now builds you. What used to drain you no longer has access to you. You see through the masks now. You feel the fakeness before the first word. You know who's real and who's performing. And because of that, you're dangerous to their system. You're not just returning, you're returning aligned. Elevated, called, and protected. Your pain birthed discernment. Your rejection birthed resilience. Your brokenness birthed boundaries. And all of that was necessary. Because now, you know who you are. Not from their opinions, but from God's confirmation. And his voice says you are chosen, set apart, called for such a time as this. So let them talk. Let them watch. Let them wonder how you're still standing. Because the version of you that ruined their illusions is now the version that's going to walk fully into purpose. Without shame, without fear, without apology. This time, you're not walking back, you're rising up. Not for attention, not for closure, but because the assignment on your life cannot be cancelled by their confusion. They may not understand your journey, but they will witness your glow. They may not support your healing, but they will watch your fruit. Because the evidence of God's hand is always louder than the noise of the crowd. Stay real. Stay rooted. Stay ready. Because the very you they tried to erase is the very you God is about to elevate. And no lie they told can cancel the truth you carry. You've kept quiet long enough, not because you were weak, but because your silence was sacred. Because deep down, you knew this wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving God right. They thought they buried you under gossip, rejection, and silence, but what they didn't know was that God was using that soil to grow something no one saw coming. The pain didn't break you, it built you. It carved new dimensions into your soul. It birthed a deeper level of discernment, a sharper spiritual vision, and a heart so in tune with the voice of God that even in the middle of heartbreak, you learned how to hear heaven. While they were laughing at your silence, God was speaking destiny into your spirit. While they were doubting your strength, God was pouring oil over your head. While they were closing doors, God was opening new realms. That's why you couldn't stay bitter, even when you had every reason to be. That's why you couldn't return hate for hate, even though your flesh screamed to retaliate. That's why you kept loving, forgiving, rising, not because you were weak, but because you were marked. And when you're marked, you carry a different weight, a different grace, a different pain. See, the real ones, those chosen, those set apart, don't just walk through trials, they carry assignments through them. You weren't just going through heartbreak, you were carrying purpose through it. You weren't just being rejected, you were being redirected. Every delay, every detour, every betrayal was part of the preparation. And now, God is calling you forward, not to show off, but to show out His glory through your story. Because when you return, it won't be to pick up where you left off. No, when you return, it'll be in a whole new realm. Elevated, anointed, transformed. And the people who once overlooked you won't even recognize you. The same people who underestimated you will be the ones watching you walk into rooms they never imagined you'd enter. But this time, you're walking differently. You're not walking in needing validation. You're not walking in hungry for applause. You're walking in full of purpose. Fully aligned. Fully surrendered. Because the wilderness taught you that you don't need a crowd when you've got Christ. The isolation showed you that you're never alone when God is present. And the silence? That's where you discovered your voice. The real one. The healed one. The called one. And now, every wound has turned into wisdom. Every scar is now a story. Every tear watered the seeds of the future you're about to step into. That's why you had to go through all of it, not because you deserved the pain, but because your purpose required it. There were things inside you that comfort could never awaken. There were spiritual muscles that only pressure could build. And now? Now you're stronger, not the fake kind of strength that pretends everything's okay, but the real strength that says, I've been through hell and still chose heaven. The kind of strength that doesn't need revenge, because peace is louder. The kind of strength that can love from a distance, bless those who cursed you, and rise above the noise without needing to shout. And when people ask how you did it, how you came back after all the rejection, the betrayal, the heartbreak, you'll simply point to God. Not because it's a cliché, but because it's the truth. Because without Him, you wouldn't have made it. Without Him, you wouldn't have healed. Without Him, you wouldn't be here, stronger, softer, wiser. You've returned, but not as the broken version they tried to destroy. You've returned as the version God always knew you were becoming. And that version? It's unstoppable, because you're no longer living for their acceptance. You're living from God's approval. You're no longer shrinking to fit in rooms not built for your spirit. You're standing tall in spaces that honor your anointing. And you're doing it without apology, because your light isn't arrogant, it's obedient. Your confidence isn't pride, it's praise. And your journey? It's not for validation, it's for testimony. Because people don't need to hear perfect stories. They need to hear real ones. And your story, every painful part of it, is now soaked in power. That's what makes you dangerous. That's what makes you rare. And that's why the enemy tried so hard to silence you. He saw what was in you before you did. He saw the influence your healing would carry. He saw the generations your courage would shift. He saw the ripple effect of your yes to God, and he panicked. That's why the attack wasn't random. It was targeted. That's why the betrayal felt personal. Because it was. But so is your comeback. It's not just for you. It's for every person who thought they were too broken, too different, too misunderstood to rise again. When they see you walk in authenticity, in purpose, in healing, they'll believe it's possible for them too. Your return isn't revenge. It's revival. It's proof that you don't have to sell your soul to be seen. You don't have to dim your light to be accepted. You don't have to betray your truth to belong. You just have to be real, and let God do the rest. Because God doesn't need perfection to perform miracles. He just needs surrender. And you surrendered. In the pain, in the silence, in the confusion. You laid it all down and said, God, do whatever you want with this. And he did. He took your ashes and gave you beauty. He took your mourning and gave you joy. He took your past and gave you a platform. And now, it's your time. Not to boast, but to bless. Not to flex, but to flow. Not to shout louder, but to shine brighter. You've returned. And everything's different. Because you're different. And that difference? That's your power. So walk boldly. Speak kindly. Love freely. And never apologize for being real in a world addicted to illusion. The right people won't just understand you, they'll be transformed by your presence. You don't have to force it anymore. What's yours will find you. Who's for you will stay. And what God has for you, no man can block. You're not just walking into a new season. You're walking into the season God prepared while you were healing in silence. This is what restoration looks like. This is what grace feels like. And this is what divine alignment produces. You're not broken. You're branded. Not finished, just getting started. Not rejected, repositioned. And from here on out, the enemy will regret ever messing with someone who was real from the start. So walk in your fullness. Speak from your healing. Shine from your scars. Because you didn't ruin anything by being real, you revealed everything they were trying to hide. And now, you return not with rage, but with resurrection. This is your rise. And no one, not them, not their whispers, not the past, can stop it. If you feel this, if it stirred something deep inside you, if you know this was written like your heart wrote it, then this message was for you. You're not late. You're not too far gone. You're right on time. God is about to do more than you imagined, and this time, you're ready for it. You're ready to rise. You're ready to lead. You're ready to live fully, freely, honestly. And you're ready to return, not for approval, but for purpose. Welcome back, real one. The world's been waiting on the healed version of you. Now go light it up.